So what you're going to need is your stabilizer, and you're going to hoop up a piece of the aqua mesh stabilizer, and then you will need a piece of the water soluble topping. So you could either use just a little piece of the Stitch 2.0, that's your topping, or if you don't have the Stitch 2.0, you can go ahead and just cut you a little piece of the aqua mesh, another piece. It just, both of them need to be water soluble. And then in your kit, you're going to have the little piece of fabric that's for one of the wings. You'll have the piece of leather, the front and back of the outside of the bag, and then 2 pieces that are the lining of the bag. And then 2 pieces of ribbon for the drawstring. And then you'll need your Kimberbell tape, your applique scissors. Now, for the leather, some of your kits are going to have 2 pieces of leather. I'm going to explain that once we get to that step. We're trying to be a little bit more efficient cutting these pieces so we can get more out of the roll of leather. And so I'll explain if you have the 2 pieces when we get to that. You'll need your thread. I'm using just kind of the colors that they used in their sample, so we'll need white, kind of the turquoise, a navy, a black, a yellow. I have wound a bobbin with the yellow thread, and then we'll also need a pre-wound. I'm going to go ahead and have the yellow thread in my machine when we start, and then later on I'll change to the pre-wound. So I'll go ahead, and then I have the yellow thread already threaded up on the machine, ready to go. And your design comes in 2 sizes, either the 5x7 or the 6x10, and your kits are cut for the 6x10, so that's the design I'm selecting. So we'll just get to the embroidery screen. So I've hooped up the 6x10 hoop with the aqua mesh, and then what it's going to stitch first is just going to be a placement line for your main piece of fabric. Oh, while it's stitching that, your prep work, all that really was to iron a little piece of SF101 onto the back of the little applique piece. So this is kind of that little teal turquoise piece of fabric. Don't put the SF101 on any of your other pieces, just that little piece. Now we're going to lay one of your outside pieces of fabric down, which is the print. This doesn't really have a directional print to it, a top or a bottom. I'm just kind of going with it, and I'm saying these little flowers and these little butterflies are upright. But then that makes this butterfly and that butterfly upside down. So I don't think it really matters. So just lay your piece of fabric down. Make sure you're covering up that whole placement line. Kind of center it over that. And then I'm going to go ahead and stitch the tack down. Well, the tack down is what stitches next. Then it's going to stitch the placement line for our little piece of the fabric that we ironed the SF101 onto it. And they're calling this the inner wing. Okay. Then I'm going to lay it down, cover up, make sure you're covering up that whole placement line, and then this is going to be the tack down. Now it's not really going to do a cover stitch over this. So I am going to trim it. So I'm going to take the hoop off and I'm going to trim my fabric, but it's not going to do a cover stitch around this one because the pieces of leather, that wing is going to go on the outside, and then where we do the cut work is going to cover up the inside. So all I need to do is trim it, and you do want to trim, you know, fairly close here on the inside part of the butterfly because that's where it is going to be doing the cut work part, and so you don't want a lot of little frayed edges sticking out into your cut work part of the design. And so once we get done trimming this, we'll come back. Okay, what it's going to stitch next after you trim that applique piece is going to be a placement line that's for the cut work part of the design. After it stitches this, we are going to be on page 6 of your instructions, this step 12, and what we're going to do is trim inside that placement line, or trimming line is what they're calling it, and it says be careful not to cut the stabilizer. So we're just going to try to cut just the fabric. So I'm going to push that back a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to take the point of my scissors and go in there and just try to get a hold of the fabric and just start a little hole in the fabric, and then I can get up in there and go, yeah, so I'm not cutting the stabilizer. So now I'm just going to butt my scissors up against that trimming line that it's stitched and just cut the fabric. So I can just kind of slide my scissors so I'm making sure I'm not getting the point of my scissors hung on the stabilizer down underneath there. And I guess if you did accidentally like cut a little hole in your stabilizer, then you could just, you know, put another piece of water soluble, tape another piece of water soluble on the bottom of your hoop to patch it if that happens accidentally. Now this is where we're going to get up next to the applique fabric here. And then this is if you didn't have your matching colored thread in your bobbin yet, like I do, this is where you'd want to put it in. So you'd want to put that yellow thread or whatever color you're doing the cut work in, put that in on your bobbin and put that bobbin in, and then what it's going to do now is start stitching the cut work part of the design. So this is going to take a little bit to stitch off, so we will just come back when it's done doing that. So it finished doing the little cut work part, and so you can see it just kind of does a little cross hatching effect all in that open area. And so what it's going to do now, the next stitch is the satin stitch that goes all around the cut work part, and it does some little detail stitches inside there. So I still have the yellow in my bobbin, and so we'll just stitch that, and then we'll be back because it's going to take like 7 minutes to stitch this part off. So it finished doing the satin stitch and all the detail and everything, and so this is when you want to, you can, I guess you really don't have to, but it says to go ahead and put your neutral color back in your bobbin. So I'm going to go ahead and change that out, and then I have gone ahead and rethreaded with a color that matches my leather piece And so what it's going to stitch now is the placement line for the leather, which is the two wings. What do they call them? Outer wing. Oh, and I forgot, you are also going to need, as part of your supplies, you're going to need a seam ripper and a safety pin for when we start doing the ribbon into the casing. And then next, this is where you're going to need, after this step, this is where you're going to need the topping. And I may not have cut this big enough. We'll see. So what we're going to do is tape this topping down. Okay, kind of angle it like that and it'll cover it all. Tape the topping down. And the reason we're putting this topping is so that when we go and we start cutting the piece of leather away, we won't catch our scissors on this cut work part of the design. And so I'm kind of stretching, not stretching, well, I'm kind of stretching. I'm pulling on this topping so that it will be taut as I'm taping it down. And make sure it's stuck down good. And then this is where we'll also go ahead and put our piece of leather. Now, this is where we're trying to be a little bit more thrifty. See how you have a piece right here? Can you see that? This is where the upper wing is going to be, and then this is the lower wing right here, and I got my piece of tape kind of over that. If you have the two pieces of leather, you'll put one up here at the top and kind of angle it going in the direction of the butterfly, and then you can put your other one down here at the bottom and then tape all of that down. If you just have the single piece of leather, don't lay it, straight up and down like that. Angle it. And you could, even if you wanted to, if you wanted a little bit more to cut apart, you could cut this apart. But I think we will make it if we just angle it like that and then tape it down. And now it's going to do the tack down. If you do have the two pieces of leather, I would tape them down, going right down the middle. And we'll come back when it's done doing this tack down. So it's stitched the tack down, and so now we need to trim the leather. And so take the tape off of just the leather piece and hold on to that because we'll use it again when we start putting the bag together. You're going to leave that topping and make sure it stays taped down, because that's going to help you go in with your scissors. So go on top of the topping, underneath the leather, and just start trimming that leather. And that's just going to help when you get up into around where the cut work part of the design is. And this isn't going to have a cover stitch, so you don't want to go too far away from your stitching, but don't go so close that you cut your threads. And then when we come in here, we're going to be trimming inside this and all the way around, and then all the way around the outside of this and up to the inside. And I don't know that there's really any trick to this except just take small little snips and just make sure you're staying on top of the topping, because see right there is where the cut work design is, and so you don't want to nick your stitches. So just watch that area right there. And so I'm just going to keep trimming away, and we will be back when I'm done. Okay, so I got the leather all trimmed and everything, and in your instructions we are on page 6 on step 20, and it says to go ahead and stitch the little wing detail and then tear away the excess topping. I'm going to go ahead and tear it away now because I don't want to have to tear it away from in between each of those little dots there. And so now I'm going to take the tape off of the topping and keep these pieces as well, because we're going to use them again probably when we start putting it together. And then if we did use the topping, it will tear away. So now I went ahead and I've threaded up with my navy, and that's what we're going to stitch. I was sitting here trying to decide. I just got to thinking, I'm doing it just like the picture. So I'm doing the little dots in navy, but you could do the kind of the coral pink color or whatever. So whatever color you want your little dots to be, thread up with that, and then we'll just stitch those, and then we'll come back. Okay, it finished stitching the little dots, and now it's going to stitch the body. So I just threaded up with the black thread, and we'll stitch that. And it finished stitching the little body, and now we're going to start the construction of the bag. So what it's going to do next are its little buttonholes or the openings for our ribbon. So I've threaded up with white, and I'll probably just keep white in the machine top and bobbin for the rest of the construction. So it's going to stitch the little openings or the little buttonholes. After it stitches the little openings or the little buttonholes, then this is what you need the seam ripper for. Just go in and you're just going to cut that little buttonhole open. Just make sure you don't go all the way through to the other end. Cut the stitches. Don't cut the stitches. And so, and I'm cutting through the stabilizer and everything. Okay. Now, next step is step 25, still on page 6, and we're going to take a piece of our lining fabric. We're going to lay it right side down, and we want the edge of it, it says, to be about a 1/2 inch above this tack down line that we stitched off earlier. So just lay it down about even with your other piece of fabric. And then it's going to sew the seam. Okay, and now the next step, page 7, step 27, it's saying to stitch the cut line with a visible colored thread. Well, I'm just going to leave the white. I'm just going to know that, okay, this cut line, drop my needle down, is going to be the line that's on top. So I'm not going to cut on this bottom line. I'm going to cut on the line that's at the top. So we'll stitch that cut line. going to take the hoop off the machine and we're going to cut on that top line. And it says to extend your cuts about a 1/2 inch on either side. Yeah. So I'm gonna go, can you see? Stand up, can you see? So I'm going right on that line. So I'm just cutting through the fabric. If my cutter works. There we go. I'm gonna get rid of that. And I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. Okay, now, do not cut the stitch seam. That's that one. Didn't do that. Now what we're doing is it says lift the lining fabric up and tuck it through the slit. So we're going to take the lining fabric. That's why it needs, your slit needs to be out here. Make this a little bit longer. Your lining needs to go through that opening. There we go. Slide it into that slit. And then we're going to pull it to the back. And we're going to go on the back side here. And I'm going to kind of finger press this down. Well, like that. And we're going to pull this down. And then we're going to tape it. Tape this to the back side. And then flip it over to this side and just kind of finger press that in good. And see, I'm not seeing any of my lining fabric here on the front. And then I'm going to tape this down back here on the back. So I'm going to use some of this tape we used a while ago. And so basically, main thing on this project is make sure your screw is good and tight, because you're going to be working with this stabilizer and pushing and pulling on this hoop and all throughout this whole project, and you do not want it coming out of the hoop. Okay, and then we're just going to put it back on the machine, and now it's going to stitch the tack down to hold that lining in place. Now it's, and I'm just keeping the white thread on the machine. Now it's going to be stitching the little ribbon casing. Run away. Now we're going to take the other fabric, that's your outside fabric, like that. My little flowers are going up. You're going to lay it right side down. This is on the front of the hoop. Cover up everything. Make sure you're covering up, so this is going to get enclosed in the seam down here at the bottom. But it also, oh, I dripped on my stabilizer. I dripped that water pin on my stabilizer. Oh, good grief. It also says to make sure that this piece is covering up this slit in your interfacing up here. So make sure you're all the way up there at the top, covering that up. And now it's going to tack this down. And we will come back when it's done doing this, because Bailey's arms are getting tired. Okay, so it's sewn that piece down. So this is your back, basically, of your bag. Now we're going to take the hoop off, turn the machine over, I'm going to take these pieces of tape off. And then we're going to take that last piece of lining fabric, put it right side down. So again, this is on the back of the hoop. This piece is going to go right side down. It's going to meet at the bottom. It's going to cover up the opening there at the top. And tape this down. Again, just watch your hoop. Make sure your stabilizer doesn't get unhooped. And then we're going to turn it back over, put it back on the machine, and this is the final stitch out. This is going to stitch the whole thing together. Phew! Hopefully, if it messes up now on this last step, cross our fingers. And it's done. Now, I did want you to see when it stitches this final stitch, it's going to stitch across the top here, then it's going to stop and like come, I think it came down here, and then stitched around, or maybe it came here, but it's kind of doing this in sections. So it's leaving an opening here for our ribbon for the casing, and then it's leaving an opening here on this side to turn it right side out. So this is on the back of the hoop so you can see it a little bit better, but it does leave those openings for us. So now we're going to take the tape off. And then you can take it out of the hoop now. And then we're going to trim it down. And we're going to trim it a 1/4 inch away from that seam line. So I'm just turning it over because I can see it a little bit better here on this side. Okay, now trim our corners. Then we're going to turn it right side out through the opening here. And you want to poke out your corners here. And it does say to whip stitch this opening closed, or stitch it shut. There. So I'm going to go get me some Steam-A-Seam or Wonder Under or something. Or heck, at this point I'm going to go get me some glue. And I'm going to glue this sucker shut. And we'll be back. So I have my opening shut. So I just used a piece of Steam-A-Seam and stuck it up in there. So now, and I press that good, now we flip it right side out through the top of the pouch. And I couldn't remember, yeah, Bailey said this is the same thing we did with those Christmas pouches last year. That were your bonus designs from last year. And she's done a couple of other projects using these little pouches. Ta-da! Okay, so then you would go and you would iron this all good. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go press this good. so we have our bag turned right side out and pressed, and so now we're ready to insert the ribbon. So we're on page 9, and what we're going to do is take your 2 pieces of ribbon and put them, both of them, right side up, and then put a safety pin through both of them at one end. And then we're going to go through the opening here, the little casing from the right hand side, and we're going to start feeding that safety pin through the opening to the other side. Poked out that opening. Bailey's got to go out front and help customers. Okay, while Bailey was helping the customer, I finished reading the instructions on doing the ribbon, and it does say, finally, down here, rinse the project with cool water to remove the stabilizer from the mesh wing and lay flat to dry. So they are finally removing it, but again, I think I would just use poly mesh. I think it's going to be a whole lot easier. So now we've got the ribbon pulled all the way through. Now we're going to take the safety pin off, and then you get a hold of the one, like the top ribbon on one side and then the bottom ribbon on the other side, and you're going to pull, and that's going to get a shorter piece of ribbon on one side and a long piece of ribbon on one side, or on each side. So you have a short ribbon and a long ribbon on either side now. Okay. Now we're going to take and flip the project over to the back. Take your safety pin again. Put it on the either side. Doesn't matter which one you do, but just take the long ribbon from one of the sides. Put the safety pin back on that. And then you're going to go back in to, or you're not going back in, there's another opening, not the buttonhole opening. Can you see that? Where the fabric is open right there. You're going to take into that, and then you're going to start feeding that ribbon across the back. And it's going to come over to the opening that's over here on this side, that's kind of basically in your side seam of the bag. Being able to see this? Okay, so coming out right there. Okay, so then I'll pull that through. Okay, then I'm going to take the other ribbon so now I have 3 ribbons on this side. I'm going to separate them. I'm going to take the safety pin off of this one and put the safety pin on this other long one. And then it's going to go back through. Now at this point, you do have to kind of basically, you're laying this on top of all of these other 2 ribbons that are here. Okay, so this is just going to kind of flip over and lay on top of that and go back through the opening here on the back. And it's going to come out, see, on top of that ribbon through that little opening. And then take your safety pin off. And wait a minute. There we go. You have, okay, so now you have 2 on either side. And when you pull it, it makes it the drawstring like that. And then you can kind of work with these. Take these and try to get them like even. So I'm going to take them and just tie a little knot down there, and then we'll cut them off. I want the knot right on the end. that and cut those at an angle, and you could put fray check on them. There we go. Voila. And then you can fill it up with all kinds of little goodies for a gift or for yourself. Pretty cute.